Hey, nation, we're speeding quickly into the end of Q1. I can't believe it. So we're back with Michael Jenkin out of Adelaide, Australia. Did I get that right?
You got that perfect. How are you?
Okay. Well, hey, Michael, always a pleasure. And as you and I talked off camera, we're really keying in on the obvious, the coronavirus matter. And we're focusing on some of the technology conversations in particular. I'm certainly not a doctor. I'm not qualified to talk from a medical perspective, but we can talk about how it affects MSP. So first of all, what's the big picture in Australia? Or are we seeing lines at the grocery store and that kind of things?
Okay, first of all, obviously all of the viewers here around the world, we're in all different locations. It's interesting to note that what's going on in your backyard is going on here as well. So we do have massive shortages of toilet paper, tissues, dry foods, any sort of noodles and dry things you can heat up, all gone. Hand sanitizer, gone. We do have lineups. We've actually had people threaten people with knives over a stack of toilet paper. Who can imagine that? It's actually getting very serious. When the pandemic was announced yesterday, since then the Australian government's now talking about closing a lot of schools. We have had schools closed, we've had universities closed. We have a lot of people who just can't get to work. They've self-quarantined. We've actually had staff do that. And we've actually seen a pretty high death rate in aged care. We are seeing people who are like carers or nurses who've accidentally brought it with them into the aged care environment. And then we're seeing the elderly, unfortunately, pass away or get gravely ill. So we are seeing quite a similar thing to what you're seeing around the world. I think it's not unique to us that people are stocking up on 24,000 rolls of toilet paper. I don't think that's unique to us. I don't think the fear out there is pretty much unique to us. It's interesting that we look a little bit different, we speak a bit different on the other side of the world, but this pandemic includes all of us, and we're all trying to think about what are we going to do for those 2 weeks if we have to quarantine ourselves? What are we going to eat? How are we going to use things? What are we going to do? And unfortunately, that has caused a lot of hysteria. And I understand that. I understand people are very scared about what happens if they have to self-quarantine. But unfortunately, things like politeness and morals seem to have gone out the window. And there literally are fights at the supermarket. And literally at the supermarket as well, you go through with your trolley and half of what you're going to buy, you have to return. Because they'll only allow us now in Australia 2 boxes of tissues and 1 lot of toilet paper and a certain amount of other things. So we are seeing it here. We've now had the Australian Grand Prix, which is due this weekend. So some really nice cars going around a track is now going to be a spectator-free event. So spectators are not allowed to go, and they're going to announce a bit later in the day if the event will go ahead at all. We've had a lot of football games, or whatever you would call over there, probably rugby, cancelled or spectator-free. A lot of music events have now been cancelled. For us here in Adelaide, we've got 3 major events. We have the V8s, which has just been through, which goes for a weekend, and now we've got a thing called the Fringe event, which is an arts festival that goes for quite some time, and we have WOME Adelaide, and lead acts in those things have had to cancel, international acts just not turning up, and of course Tom Hanks, famous actor, has now got COVID-19.
Yeah, that's one of the ones.
And
that's
unfortunately. And his wife, unfortunately.
Got tested. Well, but good on them. I mean, thank God they have testing available. I was going to make mention of that. Before I ask you the next question, I think you, if I'm correct, you have school-age children, right? This would impact you. Yeah, personally, I'm on the other side at the college level and beyond. So, but hey, next question. Has it caused you to rethink your business model in terms of on-site visits versus using some of the mobility tools like remote management and monitoring? So is that kind of working its way through the wetware of your head?
It is. Just to explain what I do, so we work in the small to medium market, and a number of our customers are actually aged care. So we are in a unique
No.
situation where we not only have the normal customer who will be quite okay if they get the coronavirus, but we have the other customers that, of our own sort of due diligence, we don't want to go anywhere near them. We do have that problem. And we have another problem we haven't thought about too. We have a number of our customers who can't see their customers and therefore can't pay the bills to us because they've been declared off limits with what they do. In fact, I saw one yesterday. It's a trucking company. Now, they truck food for McDonald's and what you would call Burger King or Hungry Jack's across the country, sometimes up to 3,000 kilometres away, and they've suddenly had all their trucks stopped. Their fuel bill on one day is $50,000. That's how much trucks they've got on the road, and they've been stopped. They've been told that when they come to the train yards to unload and put things in the trucks, drivers can no longer leave the cabs, paperwork can no longer go between people by hand, and a lot of other restrictions, which has delayed a lot of things. And those businesses have got SLA agreements in place, like McDonald's. They don't want their food late, but unfortunately, that's what's happening. Now, for us, yes, remote management tools, remote desktop, whatever have you that you're using, has become very important. Being very clear on the phone has become very important because you're not seeing people in person, and being very courteous. Also, obviously, it makes it a bit difficult when there's something like a hard drive failure or something like that. We can't go out and see it. So we're having to work remotely to provision second machines for people to use, worry about the broken machine in a couple of months' time when things clear up. And there's the other thing as well, supply. The Foxconn factory in China got shut down for a large period of time. And when it actually started to come back online, a lot of people didn't come back out of self-quarantine. So we're finding a lack of laptops and desktops and whatever have you is not coming out of China. And of course, Australia has also blocked flights from China, and we've blocked flights from other locations as well. So goods are not arriving, people aren't arriving, conferences aren't being attended, we can't go to training sessions that don't exist or they've been shut down. And recently we've also had a staff member self-quarantine. His son came back from an international basketball event in New Zealand and was feeling ill on the plane. And now, of course, we get down a staff member. So we're being affected financially from the fact that we've lost a staff member, financially because customers can't pay their bills because they can't get their bills paid. We're getting stuck with no stock, and we're doing everything via RMM tools as best as our ability can do. So we have changed it. The business used to be a lot of on-site things because we like to shake hands and meet people, and that was probably more than 60% of it, and the rest was remote. Now we're probably talking that swap the other way, if not 70% now is remote or delayed. And some customers have simply said, we're not going to have the finances going forward, let's just push it back.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm going to change up the interview. I had one more question about your customers and remote workers, but I've actually covered that with Dennis Wilson out of LA. You raised a couple interesting points I want to double click into before we go, and that is the economic multiplier effect, and that flew by real quick, but we haven't talked about that. If the candlestick maker doesn't pay the bread maker, then the MSP doesn't get paid.
That's right. That's right.
Into that, that's actually, we haven't covered that. It's all integrated, and when there's a disruption, you feel it.
We do. Now, the Australian government's come out with a unique idea. They've brought out a sort of a package to assist with that, where they're going to allow grants to small business to actually draw down some money to sort of bridge that gap. But it's not available to us for quite a few months. So we have to find a way to bridge that gap ourselves. Now, we all know that in small business, cash is king. Unfortunately, that king has now died for us because we're owed substantial amount of money, not just for labor, but for goods. And we also have suppliers knocking on our doors who are much bigger than us. They turn over billions of dollars a year, and they're knocking on our door for thousands of dollars. So yes, it does affect us. What I realized yesterday though, and after talking to this customer who also went through the bushfires. Now it's interesting sort of connection here. They had 25 trucks stuck on the Great Ocean, sorry, not the Great Ocean Road, across the Nullarbor Plain between Adelaide and Perth. And there was a wall of fire for 2 weeks that kept the trucks out of Perth. Now they were carrying fresh salmon, tuna and things like that. And they told me they had to pay their employees a breakdown rate every single day of an extra $300 plus they had to keep all the fridges on all the trucks going. So they staggered the trucks across all the petrol stations, and we're talking 2,000 odd kilometres, to keep these trucks going for 2 weeks, only to deliver food that had spoiled anyway because it was past its use-by date. Now, that was caused by a fire for 2 weeks. Now let's talk about coronavirus, where it's staggered, because you have a 2-week incubation period. You don't know you're sick. You now infect all the other truck drivers. So suddenly you have half your fleet going off this week, the other half going off next week. So instead of being out of truck drivers for 2 weeks, it's 2 months. That business can't be insured against this kind of thing. In fact, coronavirus, you can't really be insured for it. So a lack of them getting their money is a lack of us getting our money. Now, we can wear that a little bit for a little bit of time, but like any small business, we've got to keep the lights on. We've got to keep everything happening. We've got to pay people so they can pay their mortgages, and they've got families. So yes, it's going to affect us. And the Australian government is trying to do that, protect us. And I know that Donald Trump's trying to do it for Americans as well, but unfortunately, we've never seen anything like this ever before.
Well, we haven't. I mean, I've been around the block a couple of times. I prefer not to say how many times, but I have never managed. I've managed through a lot, brother, but not a pandemic.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're all in this together. And then probably I'll conclude with this, that it's not so much a question, but just an acknowledgement of the conversation we're having about the supply chain. Because you talked about that in one of our recent interviews about the Australian fires and the supply chain being disrupted to get parts and equipment. That is a well-known conversation up in the popular media about the China supply chain. But just for my own edification, you're probably seeing that down there, or you're going to see it, that, you know, storage and go.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's not just computer things. A lot of the food, Australia, we're obviously not far away from Asia. A lot of our things do come from there. And look, just going through the shops, it's really depressing. There is not a lot of things on the shelves at the moment. People are fighting. Even if you drive 200-300 kilometers from where you normally live, you still find empty shops. You still find things aren't there. Now, not only is the problem that we can't get things in, we can't get ETAs. We don't know when things are going to arrive because no one's answering the phones at the other end. You've got to bear in mind, for instance, the Foxconn factory. Now, they make memory, they make RAM, they make iPhones, they make so many products. They got shut down, and then when they've opened up, people haven't come out of quarantine. So no one's answering the phones, no one's taking the orders, and if they're in self-quarantine, they're probably still sick. So you don't want them at work anyway. When we go through the normal phase of a Chinese New Year, we normally have about a month lag afterwards of seeing things. At the moment, this looks like a 3-4 month delay. Whether they see them come across on boat because the planes have been cancelled, I don't know, but we're just not seeing things. The other side of things is we're now paying more for things. We had a laptop that we quoted to a client, and by the time we received it, it's $200 more. Not $50 more, not $20 more, $200 more. And of course, there's also delays in getting stuff done. The other thing we found difficult is this software we deal with, where the serial numbers are issued via a person from the support of that company. They've closed down. We've got the software, we can't install it. So the human being is also very, very important in getting that product onto desktops. So in general, we're looking at probably a 3 to 4 month lag in getting some of that stuff through. It's going to be quite interesting.
Man. Well, I'll tell you what, when we talk to you next month, let's have a happy conversation, because doggone it, we found ourselves talking about fires and pandemics, and I love Australia, just love Australia, and keep up the good fight, man. We'll talk to you next month.
Not a problem. You have a great time.
All right.